All right, so in honor of almost end of Chanuka, so I want to talk about what exactly it means that we have a victory over the Greeks, and what was the danger of Hellenism, and what it was that we're celebrating, the fact that we overcame Hellenism. So there's a very interesting thing. There's a book that I've taught this in different schools called the Sefer HaKuzari. And the Sefer HaKuzari is a very interesting start. It's a book written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi from medieval times, and he talks about this story. I imagine it's fictitious story, that there was this king, and he was a pagan king, and he was a priest for his pagan religion, and one day he had a dream. He had a recurring dream that there was some voice that was telling him that your desire, your intentions are find favor in the Lord, in the eyes of God, but your actions don't find favor in the eyes of God. And so he realized that he's doing something wrong, and he realized that he needs to find a new religion. And so he went religion shopping. And so first he spoke to a Greek philosopher. And after he spoke to the Greek philosopher, and that did not find favor in his eyes, then he spoke to a Christian sage, then he spoke to a Muslim sage, then finally he spoke to a Jew, and the Jew, lo and behold, it's written by a Jew obviously, the Jew obviously convinced him, and he converted to Judaism. And not only did he convert to Judaism, but he converted his entire people to Judaism. And in fact, there's a conspiracy theory that this is not true. That this is where all of the white Ashkenazi Jews, this is where we're all from, because how could if the Jewish people were from Mesopotamia and they were a Hebraic tribe and Semitic tribe, and so where does Westerners come from? So this, I seriously, I once had a student that like was explaining to me why he doesn't want to be religious, and one of his arguments was because anyway, like it doesn't really make sense I'm Jewish because like I'm white and I'm Ashkenazi, like it doesn't like only Sephardim are the real Jews. Like okay, so Sephardi pride, I'm all for Sephardi pride, but sorry pal, that's not the truth. And really, us Ashkenazi Jews, we're the Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking Yiddish, and we certainly are the real deal. But anyway, but in the first chapter, so he speaks this king, so he speaks to the Greek philosopher, and from the perspective of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, from the perspective of Torah. So the first thing that he wants us to understand is what is the difference between Judaism, Jewish values, and Jewish philosophy and Jewish thoughts of God against the Greek religion, the Greek understandings of God. And so I want to just really, so today's class is really based on that first chapter in the Kuzari, that he speaks to this Greek philosopher and asks him, tell me about your God. Tell me everything I need to know. Tell me how to be a good person, how to live a good life according to your worldview. So he starts off by saying three things. That these are the three things that we can discern between what I want to call the God of the philosophers and the God of Israel. Okay, and this is precisely the three things that we are celebrating on Chanuka, and this is really just like this is relevant for the whole year. This is something just to understand what is Judaism all about, and what are we celebrating the fact that we have Judaism instead of Hellenism. So the first thing he says is that God, so he believes in God. He believes in God, even though, like we mentioned in the previous class, that it was actually Greek culture that came up with the first atheist. The first atheist was an Epicure. It was Epicure that was from Greece. That before Greece, that nobody could have the audacity to think that there was like the world just came from nothing, and so in Greek, but this Greek philosopher, so he did believe in God. Aristotle believed in God. Plato believed in God. Socrates believed in God. The main Greek philosophers, they did believe in God. But the question is, what is the God that you believe in? Who is the God that you're believing in? And tell me how to serve Him, how to connect with Him, and how to be a good person. And so first of all, he says that God, He has no ratzon and no sinah. He has nothing that He likes, nothing that He dislikes. Because if I want something, so then that means I'm lacking something. And God is perfect. So if God is perfect, so it doesn't make sense that he's lacking anything. So by definition, so he can't have any lacking, so he can't have any desires. So when all these religious people, they say that God has desires, what's his desires? That's what we call mitzvahs. That mitzvahs, there's no room for mitzvahs. Because God, he doesn't have any desires. He doesn't need anything. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what you do. It doesn't matter to him. It doesn't matter to him that if you act like this, if you act like that, there's nothing that makes him happy. There's nothing that ticks him off. That when you like you really think that, like the philosopher said, you really think that if you do something wrong, you think that God's going to get all angry at you, and he said, "How dare you? I'm going to get back." And like that's not perfect. That's like, like God, like take my hair to have a joint. Let's calm down. It's kind of like you just need to calm down. And to think that God gets angry when people go against his will, like what the heck? Like that, the philosopher doesn't see that as a godly feature to get angry at people. And so, in fact, there's nothing that he hates. Like, do it. Just you be you. Everybody just God lives and let lives, because that's the mature thing to do. And for God to have desire or hate to things that, what's desire or hate? We call that mitzvot aseh, mitzvot lot aseh. Things that you should do, things that he wants you to do, things that he doesn't want you to do. That is not godly. For God to want you to do something, for God to want you not to do something. So that is making him into a human being. They're like human beings, I get it, human beings, that I like when you give me presents, I don't like when you slap me in the face. That makes sense. But God is above that, because God is perfect. So the fact that God will have ratzon and sinah, so that's the first thing that this Greek philosopher says that is against the rules in his ideas, in his vision of a perfect God. Number 2. So it says that he doesn't know what you do. He doesn't know what you do. And the reason is because God is perfect and God is infinite, so that it's impossible for God to have anything which is changing. So God's existence is what it is, and so what we do is constantly changing. So because what's going on in this world is constantly changing, so that's not infinite, that's finite. And because God is not finite, so how could he be connected to anything which is finite? So whatever we're doing in this world, for God to have a knowledge, God's knowledge is things like that, things like logic, things like 2 and 2 is 4, things like that the truth is that you should be a good person, the truth is that you should be a kind person. Those are things that are eternal, those are things that are infinite, those are things, but that Johnny went to school at 9 in the morning, he didn't come late. That's something which is, well, tomorrow he's going to do something else. That's something which is finite, that's something which is not bequeathing God to have such a behavior that is going to be connected to something which is finite. Okay, so that's number 2. What do we call that? We call this hashgacha. Hashgacha. Okay, his first problem, not problem. He has no problems. That his first difference between Greek thought and Jewish thought is in mitzvahs. That does God really care? And number 2, that does God even know about you? Okay, and number three, that he says that he doesn't know you. He doesn't know who you are. He doesn't know who you are. Certainly, he doesn't know your intentions. And certainly, he doesn't hear your prayers. Okay? And this is for the same reason that for God to have a connection with a human being, like that's only human beings can have human connections with human beings. But God is beyond that. Right? God is infinite, so it doesn't make any sense for God to know about you personally. There's no such thing as a personal God. The way I like to understand it is that if I would tell you that I have a relationship with an ant, so you think that's pretty weird, right? Because like I'm a human being, I have a big brain. And the ant has a little ant brain, and how could me with my human brain connect with an ant with an ant brain? That doesn't make any sense. So certainly the difference between my brain and the ant brain is actually smaller than the difference between my brain and God's brain. Mm-hmm. So like it's it's so impossible for, just like it's impossible for me to connect with man, so it's even more impossible for God to connect with me. It's not a logical possibility. So that's why he says that it's impossible to have a relationship with God, because God is infinite. Okay, so this is his third difference between Judaism and Greek, and the Greek look at God. So, and this is what I call relationship. So that Judaism is based around the fact that God cares about me. Certainly that God answers my prayers, that God listens to my prayers. And not just that, even when he's not answering my prayers, just like the Torah says, "B'kol tzara tam lo tzar," that anytime that a Jew is going through something tough, so Hashem is in pain as well. And it says that Hashem is crying, metaphorically obviously, but about when things aren't going well. And when things are backwards, so it pains God, and when God is happy for us when we're doing well, and he's proud of us when we're being strong, and it makes a difference. That's called having a relationship, and that's just something that doesn't exist in the world of the Greek philosopher. So what is truly the religion of philosophy? So when it comes to mitzvahs, so he says that there's no such thing as mitzvahs. There's no such thing as things that you need to do and things you don't need to do. And the point is always that to idolize the God, to idolize who he is, the concept of God, which is in other words to have a concept of truth, to have something that I'm looking up to, and that to realize that there is a truth, there is something that I should be striving for, and number two, that because I'm connected to this truth, so that should express itself in the fact that I have good character traits. Okay, and he names some of his positive character traits that even in his atheist, not atheist, but in his philosophical mind. So he says that histapkut is a good character trait, not to be obsessed with materialism, and like none of these meat plates, none of these sushi platters, and like to be like brand names, and like that's something that like even the Greek philosophy understands, not to be super materialist, and shiflut, to be humble, to feel like I'm not the center of the universe, which is beautiful. You know that's not. It's beautiful that he was able to come to that conclusion himself. There was actually a Jewish philosopher named Baruch Spinoza that he disagreed with this. If I'm like that, he thought that humility is a weakness. He thought that it's like that to be humble is a sign of weakness, and that it's better to be powerful, to be full of yourself. And so Baruch Hashem, this Greek philosopher, so he was able to realize that humility is actually, and the truth is I don't know how Spinoza. I promise you, if I would meet Spinoza, I wouldn't be able to stand him, because people that are full of themselves are just unattractive. Like the people that are always like talking about how great they are, and it's just I don't know. I think I'm super sensitive to this, but like I just can't stand them, and I really can't stand to hear them, can't stand to be around them, and so I don't know. He apparently is this. They sometimes get a good following. People that are enough full of themselves, like they're especially if they're charismatic, then they can convince the people that. Anyway, I don't understand that's part of the evil of the world. But anyway, so the second thing is about the second thing that he have in his religion is to have good character traits, to have good midot. Okay, and he believes in being kind, he believes in being nice to people, and he believes in being humble, and believes to be not materialistic. So those are all character traits that he says that if you're connected to the truth, the objective truth, then you'll follow through with these kinds of character traits. So this is what Hellenism is presented to us in the book of the Kuzari, and so the king, so he tells him that well, there's something that, like, I hear what you're saying, but I know that you're wrong, because I had a dream, and in my dream it said that your intentions find favor in the eyes of the God, of the Lord, but your actions don't find favor in the eyes of the Lord. So that means that there's some actions that find favor and some actions don't. And you said I can do whatever I want. You said that there's no such thing as mitzvahs, there's no such thing as a various thing. So I know from my dream that so whenever I read this chapter in the Kuzari, so it always bothers me that I think maybe some people are very naive, gullible, and that when they read the Kuzari, they believe that there was actually a king that had a story, and there was actually the whole thing is actually true. I mean, it's true that there was a place called Khazar, but the rest of the story, this is the first thing we hear about it. Like, if you look at Wikipedia, the only evidence that there was such a thing, that these people actually converted to Judaism, was only from the Sefer Kuzari. So that says to me that it's not actually a historical fact, and rather this was just a fictitious way of a poetic license, so to speak, a technique that he used in order to make his book more interesting. That he made up a story and it's okay. It's like, I have nothing against him. It's actually more interesting this way. But the thing is that like, does he really expect us to buy it? Does he really expect to you're telling us at length what this Greek philosopher believes, and you're saying that the Jew, that the hero of the story, he says, that makes a lot of sense. You're making a lot of sense, and the best you can say is, but it goes against my dream. But I don't think there was actually a dream. So what does that mean? So I think that's a very deep thing that the Rabbi Levi is telling us in this part of the story, and that is that there is actually truth. There is actually truth to this look at God from the perspective of the Greek philosopher. But the difference between philosophy and Judaism is that we are not limited to what we can accomplish with our human brains. That the philosopher, so if you want to know what is the source of knowledge, so the source of knowledge is the human brain, and anything which is beyond the human brain, so I don't believe in it. And in Judaism, so the brain is beautiful, but it's not always going to get you to the truth. And there's something which is greater than logic, there's greater than cerebral information, and that is revelation. Mm-hmm. And there's something that we can get from a higher source, that God actually talks to human beings, and that's Ma'amad Har Sinai, and it's not just Ma'amad Har Sinai, that God can even talk to me. God can talk to all of us. We can, through our intuition, through something which is, in Kabbalah it's called Ratzon. That the intuition of a person is connected to a higher source. The Baal Shem Tov has a Torah that Ratzon is the letters Tzinar. Tzinar means a pipe. That through a person's Ratzon, a person is connected to the higher source, and a person can get insight from God through his Ratzon. And this is not through thinking, this is not through contemplating, this is not through using my brain. This is to tapping into something which is deeper than my brain. And that's what Rabbi Levi was saying in this part of the story, that the only reason why we know that God is the way we do is actually only from higher sources. Now, but the question is really that he has some good arguments here. Okay? He has some good arguments that number one, that how could God care what I do? Right? Number two, that why would God have any knowledge of what I'm doing? And number three, how can I have a relationship with God? Okay? Number three, number one, how does it make a difference? How does it make sense that God has desires at all? Number two, how do I make a difference? And number three, that how can I ever have a relationship? So this is really all these three issues are interrelated, and the way I once heard it from I believe that the person who said this is himself pretty more aligned with this Greek philosopher, but he has a book about the Rambam, where he wants the Rambam to be basically an atheist, and he writes that God is the biggest danger to religion. And what he means is that the more that you're into God, the more you think about God, the more you understand that God is infinite, the more you realize that religion doesn't make sense because of these reasons. Because if you really realize how amazing God is, if you understand that God is infinite and what to think about what it means that God is infinite, so then you start to think with your brain that but how could God have things that He likes and He doesn't like? How could I make a difference to God's master plan? And how could I have a relationship with Him? And so really, the secret to this problem is something which is taught to us in Kabbalah, and it's the very first teaching in Kabbalah. The very first teaching in Kabbalah, and in Chabad they always say like the Yad Kislev was meant to be the introduction to Chanuka, and because there's something about Chassidus, which is like the making Kabbalah relevant to us. There's something about Chassidus which allows us to really celebrate Chanukah properly, and this is really it, because the essence of Chanukah was this fight against this philosophical look at God, and the truth is that they have these they're great in numbers and they're stronger than us, and they're like, how can we defeat them? So the only way to defeat them is with a secret from Kabbalah. And it's incredible that like without Kabbalah we would never understand how it makes sense to be Jewish. like it's crazy. It's crazy that before this idea that anybody that was just keeping Shabbos, keeping kosher, so either he was just like, he was really, really stark and like, I don't care that it doesn't make sense, or he just wasn't thinking. Because without a very simple teaching from Kabbalah, so it's really, nothing makes sense. And this teaching is called Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum. That Tzimtzum means that Hashem, so He condensed Himself, He contracted Himself, and in this contraction lies the very building blocks of reality is through the Tzimtzum. Okay, so what is the Tzimtzum? So the Kabbalah teaches that before there was a world, so all there was God. There wasn't nothing. There was God, and so it says that God has a problem. That I have no room, I have no space. How do I make a world? There's no space. So the first thing He did before He started creating a world was that He contracted Himself to the sides, and then in the middle. So then there was this empty space. Okay, obviously everything is metaphoric, but the first step in the creation of the world was this tzimtzum, was this making space, and in this space, that is where the world existed. Okay, in this tzimtzum, so this is, first of all, there's volumes and volumes written about what does that mean? That basically the question is it supposed to be taken literally? Did God actually become smaller? That on the one hand, so that if God is smaller, then He's no longer God. How can you say that God is not God? That's heresy to say that God is not God. On the other hand, to say that it's not literal, so that means that actually the world never exists, because the same problem that existed at the beginning, so meaning that there's no room, so if it didn't really change, so then it's all a certain idea in a certain way of thinking, like in God's imagination, so we exist. But for real, no, for real, God's still infinite and we don't really exist. And that's very dangerous, to think that we don't really exist.
Is it lack of space? Like a white space?
What do you mean, white space?
Like, He didn't necessarily make Himself smaller, but He made space for the world.
So if He used to be infinite, and when He was infinite there was no room for anything.
Yeah.
And so now that He made space, so now He's no longer infinite.
It's like if somebody's dating, they have to make space for somebody else. That's not making yourself smaller, it's just opening yourself up for...
Okay, I agree with you. I actually like that. I like that connection that you're making, because Rabbi Nachman makes the same connection.
Nice.
And Rabbi Nachman says that that's what it means, that Hashem created the world with His rachamim.
Right.
With His rachamim, with His compassion.
Mm.
Because what's it mean compassion? So there's a beautiful thing that the word for rachamim is the same word as rechem, which means womb.
Mm.
Mm.
So what's the connection between compassion and womb? Because what's it mean to have compassion is to make space in myself for somebody else, which is precisely what a womb is. Okay? So you're very correct in what you say, but still, that even intellectually, even theoretically, the question is still that did anything change or did nothing change? At the beginning there was a problem. Before the Tzimtzum there was a problem, and that there was no room, whether it's actual space, whether it's theoretical space, and it was through this Tzimtzum that something changed in order to solve the problem. So this question still, is it literal or is it not literal? And both sides are problematic, because if it's literal, then you're saying the God is not God, and if it's not literal, then you're saying that we're not really us, that we're just a figment of God's imagination. And this is also in the this was a different student that wanted to not be religious, and his rationale for not wanting to be religious is because, anyway, who says we really exist? Maybe we're just a figment of God's imagination. I promise you, I wouldn't make this up. I couldn't make this up, but he actually said this. So that's what we call an existential crisis. So this is the Tzimtzum. This is a big debate. What exactly does the Tzimtzum mean? And it's a big debate within Jewish philosophy, within Jewish thought. But bottom line, this is the answer to all the questions. This is the answer that it's true that God originally, so he was infinite. And the essence of God is something which is infinite. And the essence of God, so it's impossible to talk about something infinite having desires and having things that he dislikes. And it's impossible to think of something infinite having connection to us, etc. But the thing is that God, because he wants to have a relationship with us, and the only way for him to have a relationship with us is by making himself smaller. So that's what he did. That's what he did. That's it. He made himself smaller. And so that Tzimtzum, that the secret of Tzimtzum, the secret of Hashem's contracting himself. So this is the only way to understand how anything in Judaism makes sense. And there's a crazy thing in Judaism that we have different ways of describing God. That we sometimes talk about Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We call him Hakadosh Baruch Hu. That Hakadosh means he's holy, but literally means that he's detached. Okay? And we sometimes call him the Ein Sof, the infinite. And we have another word called the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah means Hashem. It comes from the word Shchuna, which means neighborhood, or Lishkon, which means to dwell. It means that Hashem also has an element that he's dwelling. And so the Shekhinah, this is a reference to the Tzimtzum. And so when we talk about the Shekhinah crying, so that you can't have something infinite crying. Infinite powers can't cry. That's just expressing emotions is not infinite, and so we're talking about Hashem having mitzvahs, Hashem having desires. So that's all the Shekhinah. That's all the after the Tzimtzum. It's not the Ein Sof has no room for anything. So the Shekhinah, when a person feels of closeness to Hashem, it's like I feel Hashem is with me. Sorry, pal, like you can't feel infinity. So the only thing that I think you're just tripping. Like so that's only before the Tzimtzum. That after, because Hashem did a Tzimtzum, so you can actually feel Hashem. And even though that doesn't make sense, because it's not infinite, but like Hashem is willing not to be infinite because he is so insistent on having a relationship with us. There's another teaching that I want to share with you, which is really very connected with this, and that's a teaching from Tanit V'Eliyahu. That this is a brisa that Eliyahu Navi taught to Rebbe Chia, and he told him that in the heavenly Beis Medrash. So they were having a discussion one day. What was the first thought of creation? What was the first thought? What was that? Obviously, that before Hashem, before what? No, way before that. That's the first thing he said. Yeah. But like when he started thinking, when he started planning the creation, so what was his first thought? That there was a first. Obviously, whatever he did first, he thought about first. But what was the very first thought? So the dispute in heaven. What was the very first thought? That option number one was that the first thought was the thought of the Jewish people. Option number two is that the first thought was the thought of the Torah. I mean, the thought of the Torah, even before the Torah, even before he's like deciphered what exactly is the wisdom of the Torah, but just the thought of the Torah. So, and Eliyahu Navi says that that there's some angels that say like this, and some angels like say that, and I say that the truth is like the angels that say that machshavtan sheyisrael, that the thought of the Jewish people shekadma lakol, that was before anything. And so I want a very beautiful explanation to this. That these two understandings of the different angels, so these are actually two different ways of looking at Judaism, because the question is really that everybody agrees that there is a Jewish people, and everybody agrees that there is a Torah. The question is like what exactly, like which one's the chicken, which one's the egg? So the first thought says that the point is the Torah. The point is the Torah. What does that mean? Hashem has ideals. Hashem has truths that He wants to be played out into the world, and that's why that was His first thought, was that He wants there to be a Torah. He wants there to be truth. And the thing is that you need somebody to do it. You need somebody to actualize it. You need somebody to learn it. And so that's why He created the Jewish people, in order that there should be people to bring out His truth in the world. Okay. The second approach says that no, it doesn't work like that. His first thought was that I wanted to have a Jewish people, and I want to have a connection with them. I want to have a relationship with them. But like, what do I do? Like, what am I like? What am I gonna? I'm gonna like. How should I start the conversation? I should like tell them about what I was thinking today. Ask him about how his baseball game was, and so Hashem created mitzvahs in order to have a way for us to connect with Him. The purpose of the mitzvahs is that we should be able to connect with Him. Really, it's not like that, and it's such a day and night. It's the way that you look at Judaism, the way we look at mitzvahs. It's so bipolar that the first way is that it's not about us. We are servants. That we are servants to the truth, and we are kneeling behind the truth, and that's our purpose. Our value in this world is because we're able to bring out God's truth in the world. The second approach says, which Alinavi says is the truth, is it's not like that. That really God just loves us. He just wants to give us hugs and kisses all day, and it's just that how do we connect with Him? So He says, you know what? I'll tell you what rocks my boat. No, that's not the wrong expression. I'll tell you what I like. I'll tell you what's my love language. I'll tell you what, like, how to make me smile. This is this makes me smile. This makes me smile. This don't do that. That mamish ticks me off when you do that. And so He created the mitzvahs in order to have a relationship with us. And not that He created us in order to bring out His mitzvahs. But the point is all about us. The point is all about how much He loves us and how much He's dying to have a relationship with us. And this is the whole reason why He created this whole reality of mitzvahs, is all in order to have a relationship with us. And this is what's called the Sod HaTzimtzum. This is called the secret of Tzimtzum, that there is an objective, infinite God, that He's the God of the philosophers. Then in that reality, that nothing makes sense. Judaism doesn't make sense, and prayer doesn't make sense, and mitzvah doesn't make sense, and relationship doesn't make sense, and that's true. But there's also another level, and that is the level of Tzimtzum, the level of the Shekhinah, the level of that Hashem is making Himself smaller because He wants a relationship with us. And then all the Hasidim, all the rabbis, I saw this from the Maggid of Mezrich, that he says a metaphor of a father who has a baby. And the father is the world's greatest physicist. And his baby, so he doesn't understand physics. He doesn't even know how to talk. So because he loves his baby so much, he wants to have a relationship with his baby, so he'll just do goo goo gaga, because that's what the kid understands. And it doesn't matter that I'm the biggest physicist in the world. And if somebody's going to say to me, like, isn't it beneath your dignity to do goo goo gaga? Like, you're the biggest physicist in the world. I said, no, I couldn't care less about my physics. All I care about is to have a relationship with my son. And this is what it takes to have a relationship with your son. So I'm there. And that's exactly what Hashem does to us. That Hashem is so awesome, and there's nothing no way to describe how great and how vast Hashem is, and it doesn't make sense that anything he's able to have a relationship with us. That's why He makes Himself smaller, in order to have this relationship. So this is really what we're celebrating. What we're celebrating about our defeat over Hellenism, our defeat over the Greek look at God, is all about this. It's all about celebrating this symptom, celebrating the fact that we know that God actually cares about us, and that He cares about us so much that He's willing to appear to us in a different way, that in order that we should be able to have a relationship with us. Okay, and this is really the essence of Chanuka. I once heard a story from Rav David of Lalov, that the once he was doing a big hadlaka, and thousands of Yidden would come to watch him doing lighting the Chanukah candles, and people from all over Russia, all over Poland, they come to see him, and so he was one year, so he was standing there, and like he was waiting, and just he wasn't lighting, and then suddenly he said that he saw there was a guy that Yehuda the Haicher, the tall Yehuda, and he said, tell Yehuda the Haicher that I want to speak to, and he was like, he's terrified. There's thousands of people ever. What's the Rebbe want from me? And so he's like stopped. He's like frozen in his place, and the Hasidim like push him forward, and so he says, like, it's a very strange thing that he says, Yehuda, do you love your wife? And he says, of course, Rabbi, I love my wife. What's wrong? And he says, good, I'm happy. Tell me something. If you love your wife, so sometimes you have to, you want to tell her something, like a secret, right? You want to tell her something that nobody else hears, right? So what do you do? What do you do? You're so tall. So he says that, well, I bend over. And so he says, could you show me? Could you show me how you do it? The Rebbe was also small. So he says, could you show me what he do? So he says, okay. So he bends over. He shows him. And he says, Yehuda, you forgot the most important part. Think. And he says, well, my wife is so short. My wife is so short that she has to stand on her tippy toes also to hear me. And he says, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And then he started lighting the Chanukah licht. And the Hasidim said that there had never been a year that he was so in flames, that he was so excited, that he was so dancing, and everything was just in the clouds. And so after the whole thing, so the Hasidim asked him, like, what was the whole story with Yehuda? And so he says, let me tell you, that I don't know, out of nowhere, so the thought came to me that Hashem is so big, He has the whole universe, He has all the galaxies, and does it really make a difference? It's if I light Chanukah candles, I don't light Chanukah candles. Does he really care? And the thought really depressed me. It really brought me down. And I wasn't. I could light the candles, but I wasn't. My heart wasn't there, and I wasn't really excited about it. I wasn't really doing it. And so I was looking around, and then I saw Yehuda, and thinking, he's so big, and his wife is so small, and I'm sure they have a way to make it work, right? So that's why I wanted to ask him. What's your secret? How do you make this relationship work? And so he said that first of all, I lean over. That Hashem, He loves us so much that it doesn't have to make sense. That Hashem leans over because He loves us so much, and that's why He's coming down to us. He's coming down, and He wants to care about us. He wants us to be available to us. But there's another point, and that is that we have to do one thing. We have to just stand on our tippy toes. We have to try. We just have to try. You have to just reach up. We're not going to get to the heavens, but just a little bit higher. And this is just what it means to be a Jew. What it means to be a Jew. What it means to be a tzaddik is a person who's trying. What it means to be a success in life is a person who's trying. And just to stop thinking so much. To stop getting bogged down with doesn't make sense. It's to just I know that this. I know that Hashem cares about me, and I'm just going to do my best. And that's really what Chanuka is all about. That to know that I matter, to know that Hashem is waiting for my little flask of oil, that it doesn't need a lot, it doesn't need to be big, it could just be a little light, and Hashem will do the rest. Hashem will let it light for 8 days, for 100 days, for 1,000,000 days. That you just have to try, you have to not give up. It's a famous question on Chanuka that we had enough oil for 1 day, and it was going went for 8 days. So that's why we celebrate 8 days. The question is that the miracle was only for 7 days. So why do we celebrate 8 days? So one of the answers is that the first day was also a miracle, because the first day they looked around and everything looked like it was finished. Everything looked that it was impure and there was no hope. And the fact that they didn't give up, the fact that they said that I'll just try. It doesn't make sense. It's a disaster. It's a destruction. But I'll just try. That's what we're celebrating. The fact that even if it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to get there. But I'll just try. I'll just do my little bit. And now this is how we function. And this is the biggest Yetzer Hara is to think that we don't matter. It's to think that Hashem doesn't care about us. That that there's a pasuk that says Ma enash kisis kirenu. That Ma enash kisis kirenu. That who is the enash? Enash is a reference to people. Who's people that you should care about them? And there's another time that we say enash, and we say Ata Yatzarta enash mikadam. We say in the Ilah of Yom Kippur. We say Ata Yatzarta enash mikadam. That you created Enosh, and you knew him, that he should stand before you, and that's what Hashem made an Enosh, that we can stand before Hashem, we can look to him face to face, that there's this Enosh, that there's this voice that tells us that you're nothing, and there's this Enosh that Hashem says that you're able, if you try, if you give it that little bit of effort, that you'll be able to look me in the face, and I'll look back at you, and you'll realize how much I love you. You realize how much I care about you. You realize how much you matter. And so this is really the defeat over Yavan, the defeat over Hellenism is absolutely all about: does my life matter? Does my mitzvahs matter? Does my actions matter? Does anybody care about me? This is all where it starts, and this is like in the darkest places, when we're feeling like when we're doing great. So then we don't have these things. It's only when things are hard, then we start having these existential crisis feelings, and this like, do I really matter? Does it really make a difference? And this is really, so the celebration of Chanuka is to know that JLM, Jewish lives matter. And that every life matters, but especially Jewish lives matter, and especially MLM, that my life matters, and that is really that how precious everything that we do is to Hashem. L'chaim.